Imagine, just for a moment, that what you've been calling depression isn't some illness to be cured. What if it's actually a message, a deep, profound message trying to get your attention? Imagine that the darkness you're feeling isn't a sign that something in you is fundamentally broken, but instead it's a clear signal that something truly sacred is trying to surface. Something ancient, something true, something that has always been there, waiting. What if this feeling, this heavy, silent ache that seems to cling to your chest and cloud your mind, isn't a defect, but a doorway? Now, I know this might sound a little bit like heresy in a world that's absolutely obsessed with being happy, with being productive, with always, always, always being okay. But please, stay with me on this, because by the time we're done, you might just start to see your suffering not as a prison you're trapped in, but as a passage you're meant to walk through. And in the final part of this journey, I'm going to reveal the most powerful insight of all, one that could completely transform how you see yourself, your pain, and your entire place in the world. Today, we're diving deep into the mystical, soul-shaking revelations found in Carl Gustav Jung's Red Book. Jung himself described this work as the absolute nucleus of all his later ideas. It's not a dry psychology manual. It's a raw, mythic, and incredibly personal record of an inner crisis. It's the story of a man who confronted the very abyss of his own psyche and somehow emerged with a clear map to the self. And in this video, we're going to follow that map together. But let me be clear, this journey isn't academic. It's not just theoretical. It is deeply personal. If you've ever felt like the ground beneath you was crumbling, like life had just lost its color or its meaning, like you were somehow completely disconnected from who you truly are, then trust me, this video is for you. We're going to explore the radical idea that you are not broken. Instead, you are breaking through. You see, Jung didn't believe that the soul could be fully understood in a lab or dissected in a textbook. He believed that the soul speaks in symbols, in dreams, in myths, and most profoundly, in the deep, silent language of suffering. In the Red Book, Jung didn't offer easy answers. He offered an invitation to descend into your own unconscious, to bravely confront your own shadows, and to emerge as something far more whole. He called this profound process individuation, the journey toward becoming truly who you are, not who the world told you to be. But here's the catch. Individuation isn't pretty. It's not always peaceful. In fact, it often begins with absolute chaos. Jung's own descent began when he broke away from Freud, and very soon after, he started experiencing terrifying visions and intense inner turmoil. To the outside world, it must have looked like he was losing his mind. But Jung chose not to suppress the chaos, he chose to face it head-on. And in doing so, he discovered something truly extraordinary, that beneath the surface of our most painful experiences lies a hidden intelligence guiding us back to the self. Could it be that your depression, your emptiness, your inner unrest is actually the very first whisper of this deeper calling? Let's be honest, depression is a word we use constantly, but how often do we truly understand it? We often pathologize it, medicate it, and desperately try to escape it. And in many cases, especially when clinical support is absolutely essential, this is necessary and even life-saving. But not all depression is the same. Not all sadness is a malfunction. Sometimes what we label as depression is actually a signal, a call to awaken from the illusions of the ego, that false self we constructed just to survive in a world that taught us to ignore our inner voice.
Jung wrote, "I had to try to understand what had happened to me. What had happened was a madness, and I had to understand it." This madness, this unraveling, wasn't the end, it was the beginning. How often do we actually stop to ask, what is my sadness trying to tell me? What part of me have I silenced? What dream did I bury so long ago that I forgot it even existed? These aren't questions our culture likes to ask, are they? We live in a world of surfaces, but the soul speaks from depth. And so Jung descended into that depth, into what he called the land of the dead, the unconscious. There, he met inner figures, archetypes, that represented different parts of himself. He didn't dismiss these voices, he dialogued with them. He allowed the images to emerge. He wrote, he painted, he surrendered. The Red Book is filled with mystical visions, encounters with ancient symbols, with darkness and light, with wisdom and madness. But here's what matters most. Jung didn't go mad. He came through the darkness not with delusion, but with profound clarity. He found that at the core of all this chaos, there was a center, a self, a truth that could not be shaken. So I ask you now, what if the darkness you're experiencing isn't evidence that you are lost, but that you are being led? What if the pain you're feeling isn't a punishment, but an initiation? Think about it. When was the last time you truly sat with your suffering? Not to fix it, not to judge it, but simply to listen to it. This is the path of the inner alchemist, the one who dares to turn lead into gold, to transform despair into wisdom. Jung believed that each of us carries within us the potential for such a transformation. But it doesn't come from pretending everything is fine. It comes from radical honesty, from going within, from confronting the dragons that guard the gates to our inner world. Do you remember the first time you felt like something was off in your life? Like you were playing a role you didn't audition for? Like the mask was smiling but your soul was silent? That moment, however painful, is sacred, because it's in that moment that the ego begins to crack. And through those cracks, the light of the self begins to shine. Carl Jung once said, "People will do anything, no matter how absurd, to avoid facing their own souls." And maybe that's why so many of us feel numb, disconnected, adrift. Because we were never taught how to turn inward, never taught that our symptoms, our sadness, our anxiety, our existential dread are not the enemy. They are the messengers. Messengers carrying the truth of who we are and who we might become. So, I'll leave you with a question that could change everything. What is your suffering trying to awaken in you? Because what if, just what if, you're not depressed? You're awakening.
There is something undeniably sacred about a breakdown. Beneath the agony, beneath the confusion and the fear, there lies a subtle but incredibly powerful shift, a disturbance not just of the mind, but of the soul. Carl Jung understood this more deeply than perhaps anyone else in modern psychology. He saw that the breaking apart of our carefully constructed identity wasn't a malfunction to be avoided. It was, in fact, the very first step on the path to becoming whole. He called this confrontation with the unconscious the night sea journey, a mythological descent, not unlike the stories of ancient heroes who venture into the underworld. But in this case, the underworld is right there, within you. Think about that for a moment. What if every sleepless night, every moment of isolation, every inner scream that no one else hears is part of your soul's journey through the night? Not a detour,
but the road itself. When Jung faced his personal descent, those terrifying visions, those spontaneous encounters with what he called the autonomous forces of the psyche, he began to document it, not as a patient trying to recover, but as an explorer charting unknown lands. And he didn't just observe these inner experiences, he gave them voice. He painted them. He entered into dialogue with them. Because he understood something that most of us have forgotten. The psyche has its own intelligence. But we have been taught to fear that intelligence. We've been taught that if it cannot be measured, tested, or rationalized, then it must be discarded. And so we silence the symbols, we bury the dreams, we dismiss the inner voice. And yet those inner messages never truly go away. They return in the form of emptiness, in the form of anxiety, in the form of what we call depression. But what if that very depression is the soul refusing to stay silent?
Jung suggested that our neuroses arise when the inner truth of the psyche is not being lived. That means when your outer life is disconnected from your inner truth, when you are living inauthentically, the psyche responds, not to punish you, but to awaken you. So ask yourself, in what ways have I betrayed my own truth to fit into someone else's story? This isn't about blame, this is about awakening. Because every time you say yes when you mean no, every time you hide your true thoughts or feelings just to avoid rejection, every time you push away your creative instincts, your desires, your hunger for meaning, your psyche feels that. And over time, that silence grows heavy. That weight? That's what we often call depression. But viewed through Jung's eyes, depression isn't a wall, it's a veil. And behind that veil is the self, waiting to be remembered. You see, the self in Jungian psychology is not just who you are at a surface level. It's not your job, your personality, your social role. The self is the totality of who you are, conscious and unconscious, light and shadow, past and future, masculine and feminine, rational and intuitive. And awakening to the self means embracing the full spectrum of your being. It's a terrifying idea for the ego because the ego thrives on control, on predictability. But the self is wild. It speaks in symbols. It arrives in dreams. It disrupts your carefully curated life with a whisper or sometimes with a roar. Jung wrote that the symbols arising from the unconscious are like a drop of water on a hot stone. If we ignore them, they vanish. But if we pay attention, truly pay attention, they lead us somewhere profound. So how do we begin this process? How do we meet the self?
First, by slowing down, by listening to our dreams, by honoring the strange images that arise in meditation or in moments of solitude, by journaling, not to track our goals, but to uncover the voice beneath the voice, the one that speaks in riddles and metaphors. Jung did this through a practice he called active imagination, a method of consciously engaging with the unconscious. He would visualize inner figures and enter into dialogue with them. He treated these figures, whether they appeared as wise old men, children, warriors, or mysterious women, not as hallucinations, but as aspects of himself, bearing messages he needed to hear. This might sound strange, but ask yourself, haven't you ever had an inner conversation with yourself? A debate between the part of you that wants to stay safe and the part that longs to take a leap? Haven't you ever heard a voice within, whispering something your rational mind didn't understand, but your soul did? That's the self reaching out. And when we begin to trust that voice, when we dare to follow it, even when it leads us into darkness, we begin to experience what Jung called transformation. Not the superficial kind, not just changing habits or chasing goals,
This is a metamorphosis of being, a rebirth. But like all births, it is preceded by labor, by pain, by the collapse of the old form. So if you are feeling like everything in your life is falling apart, what if that is the necessary condition for something new to be born? Let's return for a moment to the myth of the phoenix, a bird that must burn to ashes before it can rise again. Jung believed this myth lives in each of us. And the fire? It's not external. It's the fire of inner conflict, of longing, of loss. But if we let it burn away what is false, what remains is what is real. And that's the paradox. Depression may be the ashes, but awakening, that is the rising.
Now, let's go deeper. Let's ask the question few are willing to ask. What if the very system we live in, our culture, our media, our institutions, is designed in a way that keeps us from awakening? What if the pace, the distractions, the constant stimulation are all numbing us to the subtle signals of the soul? Jung warned that modern society has lost touch with the archetypal, symbolic life, that without a connection to meaning, to mystery, to the mythic structure of the psyche, we become spiritually starved. And in that starvation, we become anxious, depressed, and hollow. But you are here. You are listening, which means something in you already knows there is more. More than the roles you've played, more than the pain you've carried, more than the life you were told to live. So now, the invitation becomes clear, not to suppress your suffering, but to enter it, to descend like Jung into the depths of your own soul, and to trust, truly trust, that there is something luminous waiting on the other side, something ancient, something holy, something that feels like coming home. And maybe, just maybe, that is who you truly are.
There's a moment, subtle, quiet, when the veil begins to lift. Not all at once, and not with fanfare, but gradually. You start to see differently, feel differently. You sense that life is no longer just happening to you, but through you. And this is the moment when you realize you were never broken, only buried. Buried beneath expectations that were never yours, buried beneath cultural scripts, family patterns, and social roles that told you who you were supposed to be. But now, after walking through the fire of your own transformation, after facing your shadow and surviving your descent, something has shifted. You're no longer seeking approval. You're no longer running from pain. You're no longer trying to resurrect the version of yourself that once made the world comfortable. Instead, you are awakening, not into who you thought you were, but into who you've always been. Jung's ultimate insight, drawn directly from his experiences in the Red Book, was that the self isn't merely the sum of your parts. It is a transcendent center, an organizing principle of the psyche that seeks wholeness above all else. And that wholeness includes not just the personal, but the spiritual. Here's where many turn away, because the spiritual path isn't fashionable. It doesn't come with credentials or applause. It requires solitude, stillness, a willingness to sit with mystery.
But Jung never saw psychology and spirituality as separate. He believed that individuation, the journey toward becoming a fully realized self, was inherently a spiritual process, not religious, not dogmatic, but sacred. It's about becoming aligned with the deeper truth of existence, the truth that you are not just a mind or a body or a name. You are consciousness. You are the observer and the observed. You are the question and the answer. You are not the story. You are the awareness behind it. And this awareness, when finally remembered, changes everything. Because now, even your suffering begins to take on new meaning. What once felt like punishment now feels like initiation. What once felt like loss now reveals itself as space for new life. What once felt like the end was only the beginning. So let's return to the promise I made at the very beginning of this journey, that the final realization would be the most important, the most powerful of all. And here it is. You are not depressed. You are awakening. This is not a denial of your pain. Your suffering is real. Your despair has depth, but its meaning is greater than you've been told. It is not a flaw. It is a signal. A sacred summons from the soul, calling you out of numbness, out of illusion, out of the false identity you were forced to carry, and into your authentic self. You are awakening to your truth. You are awakening to your shadow, not to fight it, but to integrate it. You are awakening to your power, not the kind that dominates others, but the kind that liberates yourself. You are awakening to your voice, the one that was silenced by fear, by shame, by survival. You are awakening to your path, the one only you can walk, the one that leads not outward, but inward. You are awakening to the realization that you are the medicine you've been waiting for.
And with that awakening, something ancient begins to stir. The archetypes come alive. The symbols speak. Dreams transform from static images into living guidance. You start to remember that life was never supposed to be a race or a performance or a burden. It was meant to be a conversation between your soul and the world. Jung believed that when the individual begins this inner transformation, the world around them is transformed as well. Because a healed soul radiates something beyond language. It changes the field around it. Your awakening is not only for you, it's for your relationships, your community, your children, the future. It is for humanity itself. Now more than ever, the world needs individuals who have walked through the night and returned with light, who have seen their darkness and did not turn away, who have embraced the truth that being fully human means being both broken and divine. So if you are walking through the valley right now, let this be your reminder. You are not alone. Jung walked this path. Countless others have walked it, and so can you. You do not have to know the destination. You only need the courage to take the next honest step. And that step might be resting, or speaking your truth, or forgiving yourself, or letting go. Whatever it is, trust that it matters. Trust that your soul knows, because it does. This awakening may not come with fireworks. It may not come with applause, but it will come with peace. The kind of peace that doesn't depend on circumstances. The kind that lives deep in your bones. The kind that says, I am enough. I am here. I am whole. And maybe for the first time, you'll be able to look in the mirror, not with judgment, but with reverence, and say, I have suffered, yes, but I have also awakened, and I will never go back to sleep. Now, before we close, take a moment. Ask yourself, what has this awakening stirred in me? What part of me is ready to be seen at last? What truth have I known all along, but was finally ready to remember? Share it, write it, say it aloud. You never know who might need your story to remember their own. And above all, keep walking. The path of awakening is not easy, but it is real and it is yours. And it leads home, to your truest self, where you were never lost, only waiting.